Alex Ansary here. It is February 8th in the year 2018. You want to subscribe right away because this is going to be an ongoing series on urban survival. This is part 2 in our reading of Survive Urban Chaos. We're going to be focused on the self-defense situation, situational awareness on a deeper level, how to deal with the mob. Have you thought about the skills that you need to defend yourself if, say, for example, someone's trying to kidnap your daughter or your loved one? What if you're a female and you're a mother and someone's trying to kidnap you or your daughter and there wasn't a strong male around? Are you properly trained with the proper self-defense techniques to ward off a dangerous situation? So this is going to be an ongoing series. I'm pretty passionate about people being prepared with accurate information. Now, I think there's a lot of bunk information. Okay, some people get a little political, and they lose people, and they lose sight of the larger threats that we could be facing. One thing that I'll say as we start here, I haven't talked about the zombie apocalypse in a while, and there's a reason why that's etched in the consciousness of a lot of people that live in cities today. Okay, I don't want to get too metaphysical here in this video. I'm going to keep this practical. Okay, but many of you believe, as well as I do, that there is something to the idea of a sixth sense. And I noticed in the artwork when I lived in Portland, Oregon, a lot of the coffee shops, a lot of this zombie apocalypse art, and how it was trending. And sometimes a trend exists, not necessarily because the mainstream media is pushing it, but it's in the collective. Disaster, in the collective. Emergency preparedness, in the collective. It's in the collective now. And there are times in which this peaks. There are times in which things calm down. So it's important to remain calm as we go into these changes. Let's not burn out here, right? A lot of people burn out. A lot of people get involved in some of the fake news, disinformation. They get all pumped up. They're ready for whoa. And there's people that are profiting off of the, let's call it the Civil War industrial complex. Those deceivers in the alternative media. That are telling certain audience what they want to hear, whether they're on the left or they're on the right. It's the same crap. See, some of us, we see the writing on the wall. Myself, I see the writing on the wall. I absolutely see the strategic threats that I face where I am currently. So I think of where I am and the things that I need to do, the skills that I need to adapt, the things that I need to have on hand, the things that I should have stocked in my vehicle. It isn't really any different than an urban survival situation. Okay? Especially when you're dealing with situations where you have a pack that you may not be able to, for example, things that you may not be able to take with you that are in your car. What if you can't take your car? What if there is no road? What if there's a fire that's preventing a car from getting beyond a certain place? Then you think about the situations with freeways and the clogging. And so the principles, the ideas apply to everybody, whether someone's off the grid or in the grid. And another thing that adds to that is that you have a lot of people that are off the grid that are being programmed by social media that aren't really off the grid psychologically. They're physically off the grid, but manufactured events taking place that can whip people up into a mind-controlled frenzy. You see, you have all these people, these cell phone devices, and not even realize where the conspiracy is, even if they think that they're somewhat woke. And this system that some of them have served, worshipped, and fought to defend is vampiring on their energies and is the source of some of their nightmares. So, let me just say as we begin, throwing my own style to this, when it comes to preparedness, let's talk about what it really means to get right with God. Okay, what does that really mean? Okay? Because running with the devil isn't going to work forever for people that serve the darkness of this world. You really want to survive the things that are coming? Right? It's time to get right with God. It's time to reverse some of that negativity and harm that's been done to others. Clear out some of that trauma. We can really talk then about surviving. But most of all, how is there survival if there isn't a will to survive? Focus on that and whatever that means to you. A will to survive. A will to keep going and not self-destruct. Because whether or not you've paid attention, there is an increase in suicides taking place. And I, at one point, knew a hardcore survivalist in Portland, Oregon. He wasn't very nice, was pretty manipulative, but in the end didn't continue to be a survivalist heading for the hills. He offed himself for some reason. And there were elements of untreated mental health issues with this particular individual. And I'm not saying drugs are the answers, right? But we need to overcome and survive. the mental health issues that we may come across. When you start seeing issues with suicides and even like a peak of them of veterans in a particular county or area in Montana, a spike. Is that natural? Are they being targeted? Is there something else going on? Again, you have people that think that they're woke, that have served this system, that may not know that the system that they've been serving has been targeting them. So I'm going to bring you a perspective that's definitely outside the box. Benefits of urban survival, the 3 essentials. We're going to be talking about gear and equipment, focusing now on self-defense. Okay. Today's video is not formal self-defense advice. By now, obviously, many of you have discovered the value and importance of self-defense, even if you're a gun owner. It's not good to just rely on guns. I've been telling this to people for years. It's not violent, train the martial arts. It's normal. It's a part of what men had to do for many, many years. Some men, some women, right, need to relearn and rewild some of these self-defense instincts within us. They have maybe been spending years and years and years on the target range where they can still focus on a straight attack and maybe something other than a projectile and maybe their hand. Same principle. Fencing, same principle. Straight line of defense. So people should be training. People should know what their strengths are. People should know what their weaknesses are on an obvious level. Self-defense versus putting yourself in a bad situation. People shouldn't go out and flaunt things, their wealth. There are elements of that are going to be discussed. Things that you have, people that you have around you, girlfriends. For some men that are really, really lost in their ego. They're about flaunting, look at my muscles, look at my girlfriend. And they may end up, but we see these videos on YouTube. See, I agree with a lot of what he has to say. Some of it I see sounds a little bit violent. But I want you to think about a situation where someone's trying to take your girlfriend or your loved one. Maybe someone's trying to take your husband, your boyfriend, and put him into a car. Would you have what it takes to make some sort of an attempt to save that person? Or would fear overflood you, me, us in that situation? The other thing is to have discernment. There's a situation where there's a mob and there are people getting raped and people getting robbed, and it's a shit in the fan situation. That's going to require more of the attitude that this guy's talking about than a situation, say, where it's Antifa or it's some other group blocking traffic. That situation where people should show restraint when dealing with people that are politically charged. Show a little bit of restraint when they're losing their shit. I didn't say let them slap you. You know what I'm saying? He talks about a mob circling a situation, drive through the crowd, and absolutely, if they're attacking you, you got to drive through the crowd in a mob situation and not just sit there and hope that it stops. Otherwise, a window's going to get broke. They're going to pull somebody out. But when you're dealing with a non-shit in the fan situation and it's Antifa, you're going to be dealing with lawyers, you're going to be dealing with lawsuits, you're going to be dealing with publicity, you're going to deal with people on the internet feeding up on that story, and it's going to be like more of that political circus. So if somebody has to discern whether it's a life-threatening situation or it's more of this political bullshit that requires discipline, restraint, and just, if you will, turn the other cheek, as long as it's not being smashed with a baseball bat. How about strategic relocation from major urban cities that have been overtaken by civil unrest? Could be said, right, that I saw the writing on the wall and left Portland before things got bad. Portland, Oregon, the city in which I left. And I wouldn't want to say curse, but have said I'm never returning to. That's not for me. It's being overtaken by vampires. And then afterwards, you had all that Antifa stuff centered there and traffic being blocked, where I talked about the invasion of the body snatchers, if you will, on YouTube by at least several years in advance. Booyah! 5 points. I'm just being honest. See my Real Portlandia series for more. All that preceded, all that civil unrest, manufactured stuff that you're seeing right now. There's a reason why Joey Gibson is there, I think, as an agent of empire. And there are more agents of empire on the left and right than most people think. And some people are just feeding into it for selfish gain, the money that people throw them, because the role that they're playing the superstar, right? Fonzie. Cool. Get the people down and people living vicariously through them, through these reality type TV show activist movements. Fight, fight, fight. Right? Pay attention to what's happening to these people. These people are being whipped up into a frenzy. I know you have your view. You're on one side or the other. Some of you. Some of you are like me. You're more observer. You're not left or right. You're like, look at these crazy humans. Everybody involved that's listening to me right now, think about it. We can learn from these videos. Look at how quickly people can get whipped up into a frenzy. And whether left or right, but in many cases, yeah, we see the crimes of Antifa. Someone being sucker punched or attacked with a weapon to where they're no better than thugs. And this is society before the shit has hit the fan. That's my point. That's my point. What if people really are hungry? People would trade each other. What happens when that happens? You have mafia-like groups. They're going to pick off couples. They're going to target men that they think are going to be tough enough to defend their girlfriend. That's going to be the ultimate mob threat. So where should we start? And I'm just going to go over just some of the most basic points instead of reading you the whole time. Okay. I want to continue to get this info out. I won't oversaturate it. Every few days we'll come back to this and we'll do another series. We'll do another reading. So much that I have to say on this. But self-defense, when a disaster strikes, urban chaos ensues. And this can and often does mean increased levels of criminality. You need only look at recent historical examples such as the London riots and Hurricane Katrina. This book was written in 2015 to see just how quickly violence can descend on a city. If you are determined to survive an urban catastrophe, then you need to know how to defend yourself. That's in your hands. Whether you have someone in your life or you're going to the right school is key. We're learning from certain videos. And hopefully at some point have a partner to train with in a safe environment where you're not like kids imitating the WE, playing WE backyard wrestling, but safe, controlled. Self-defense really comes in two parts. The first is avoiding the need to fight, flaunting ego, right? You can see on YouTube people getting themselves and their girlfriend in bad situations, jumped by gangs because of however it went down in the bar. If you fight with someone, you are committed to a course of action that may lead to your death, and there are no guarantees of survival. It's better to avoid a confrontation in the first place. So that's where he starts. This can mean standing your ground, by the way. If you have to fight, it should be only as a last resort. And only if such quick and decisive action is heavily in your interest. If you do have to fight, then this book can only help you somewhat. It's about the psychology, understand what you're up against. Fighting in real life is not like watching the MMA or boxing. If you're dealing with a group, you can't be on the ground for more than, but learning ground defense to get yourself up but not be grounded and pounded is key. The reality of it has little to do with techniques and moves. It's more about mentality, self-belief, and decisiveness, and all of these things can only be honed with practice, which is why I strongly recommend that you take up a martial art. If you enter a fight for the first time in your life against someone who's fought many times before, then regardless of other factors, you are likely to lose and lose bad. Early warning system. So this is something new to me, right? So I'm just going to pass on this information. Might be valuable. A good defensive measure to have, especially if you're living in a temporary shelter, is an early warning system. In a house you may have an alarm, but if you need a rudimentary alarm system, it suggests a portable PIR, standing for Passive Infrared Unit, okay, which takes 4 AA batteries and has a regular PIR sensor that detects movement. Okay, it talks about a 4-digit PIN code to arm or disable the alarm. A shrieking alarm that's very loud that will definitely alert you and frighten someone trespassing. And one other thing I'll mention in addition to that, it's actually something that I saw here locally off the grid in rural Colorado. It's solar powered, I believe. There's a lot of solar powered items that are out there. Also news about the tariffs, by the way. Tariffs. Solar panels have gone up 30%. Get your solar panels on eBay at a discount price while you can. Less prices already went up. But I've gotten some decent solar lights. This one was a motion detector. Think about a situation where someone's trespassing. Someone's looking to steal something somewhere off the grid, and they know how to walk quietly. What about a motion detector? A lot of off-grid residences don't have one because of the power typically required Same thing with surveillance systems. So, you know, I'm still looking into what off-grid surveillance systems, motion detected, might be valuable to invest in, you know, for my own interests. Other things that are out there. So there is a light, solar-powered motion detector, $20 range, very affordable. Things that have off-grid applications have obvious particular interest to myself and elements of the audience. They're also off-grid. Many off-gridders out there with different political beliefs that still watch things that I'm saying because also the information that I've accrued and the things that I'm passing on. So we go to the next subsection. How would you deal with this? Put yourself in those shoes. How to pass through or escape a mob. When moving from point A to point B on foot, you will usually take every precaution possible, but there may be times where you find yourself within a huge mob or having to pass through one. I know that I have. I know that others have. That have survived things that I'm not so sure that I would. The key here is to pass unnoticed. A mob is unusually highly uncoordinated, with many different individuals and small groups minding their own business and doing their own thing. If you can pass yourself off as a similar small player in a massive mob and not stand out and think like the LA riots or something extreme here, then you can safely pass through and emerge on the other side. Although I've been to a Black Lives Matter protest as an observer and felt the aggression from the crowd that looked at me as if I was potentially the enemy, whoever they were viewing their enemy to be at that moment. I've often been dressed by the Portland liberals as too clean cut and something to be suspect as an agent of the government, believe it or not. Find it humorous or not, agree with it or not, I find it a little bit sad and hyper-paranoid. A society that isn't able to accurately look at things has a questionable survival rate. Societies have a questionable survival rate when Rome is burning. If they have dirt in their perception space and they don't want to see through the veil, clean up that psychological space, eliminate the dirt, see reality as it is, right? See a lot of people, no, the cell phone, smartphone is not reality as it is. There's decent information you may access, including this video, on a phone, but the phone itself is not. The fountain of intellectual youth. It's just a vehicle. So we talk about a mob situation. Do not run. You know, the more I deal with this truth, that in some situations, fear really is toxic. Not only for your body, but to live in fear in general. And how there are certain principles, if you're dealing with a bear, if you're dealing with a group of dogs or a dog, there are certain ways you don't act, like do not run, do not show fear. Don't you find it interesting that with some humans it's the same thing? That when you show fear is when the problem arises and someone wants to advance. It's very interesting. It's important that we learn these lessons sooner than later, lest the mistakes we make in the future be fatal. Avoid eye contact with other rioters. Look where you're going the distance, as if you know where you're going. You know, I can visualize what the picture that he's painting. Do not glue your eyes to the ground, as this brings suspicion. It makes it clear that you're trying to avoid eye contact. Be natural and as calm as possible. If you have a backpack where it is on one arm only, sling it over to the side, out of the view of riders if you can. Any of you fans of Police Academy? I'm not a fan of the police per se, but it's a funny movie. Plus, Police Academy 2, when they have, like, I think the riot situation is at Detroit, or some sort of a city where they have a collapse, and all of a sudden everybody is picking up bats and starting to riot in this poor part of town. We look at the backdrop of what was going on in the early 1980s, late 70s, or older audience members will know, but major economic problems, explosion, right, in the value of gold. A lot of people got involved in the drug business. Miami Vice was on TV. It was almost as if it was encouraged for people to go out and get little extras, quote, Goodfellas, and the types of movies that were out during that era. They were just swept up in the materialism of the 80s and the prisons that followed, the lives of many that got involved in the old Wild West before old Big Brother. Before a lot of these guys got caught, once they brought the machine, the cameras into the mix, and it just boosted this prison industrial complex. So I bring that up for a number of reasons. Talk about the riot situation. If you're in a car and a mob starts to attack your vehicle, the best thing to do is hit the gas and get out of there, all the while banging your horn. Do not think about those who you may run over in your path. Any hesitation could lead you to being dragged out of your car and killed by the mob. If you come face to face with a mob, what should you do? Should you immediately run? Which we covered. Absolutely not. He writes, coming face to face with a mob usually means that one person in the mob has identified you as a potential target. They are still assessing you, otherwise they would have already attacked you. By calling you out, a member of a mob is actually protecting themselves, getting to know you better in order to weigh their chances, gauging you, sizing you up. This is not a deliberate ploy, but something that happens naturally and without thinking, animal instinct. A little bit dramatic, you get one chance and one chance only to answer them and show them that they should not waste time on you. And he gets involved here in the writing. I don't know if I should get into. You need to get into the mindset of a crazy alpha male. Imagine a guy who fights for enjoyment and has over 100 fights in his lifetime, though he has won most of them. He doesn't even think about losing. He never assesses the risk because he's a hard case. He's a good old American badass. A son of a bear you're messing with. And the rest of the song goes, now you're messing with. Da, 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 da. You see where he's paying this. Only in a situation where it's life or death. They're going after your girlfriend. You're going to have to make some moves. I'm not an expert, but someone that survived some fights to the death, attacks on this person, and my mother has lived to survive to tell me many stories. So the person actually taught me some of the fundamentals of hitting that dated my mother in the early 80s and some other periods. Person of Asian descent that, during what I call the underworld 70s and 80s of Portland's past, someone that experienced elements of that was violent enough, dangerous enough to live in that kind of world. Right? Again, that pre-Big Brother world, loan sharks and collectors and bouncers and all different types of people that fulfilled this occupation before the police state took over and took some of those same violent people and just made them official. Now you're official. But anyways, as a result of the way that he lived, he had certain abilities. And certain people out there, certain criminal elements would underestimate him. Maybe because he wasn't 6 foot tall, but more of a stout 5'10", 225 pounds. But maybe through the clothing and the way he walked, not revealing, right, how toned and muscular and how dangerous and how fast he actually was. So he tells this story often. One night, 1982, he's leaving the nightclub, thinking about, don't you want me, baby, or some sort of a song like that. Won't get to karaoke with you, but just to paint the picture in the mind's eye, early 1980s, economy sucks. Types of aggression amongst the population. Who's got the girls? Who doesn't? Who's got the gold? Who doesn't? Kind of like today, you know what I'm saying? Portland, Oregon, 1982. No one to hear you screaming, no dark alley. And if you don't defend your girlfriend, maybe something bad may happen to her in that deep, dark alley. And something bad could have happened that night. His sixth sense just knew they were following them. Himself and my mother on the way to the car. It was near the Burnside Bridge, on the west side in what's known as Old Town Chinatown. Those that have been in Portland, Oregon, and know the late 70s and 80s knows that was an even rougher place to a certain degree than it is today with all the police running around their little scooters and their little helmets. They look so cute. So they're being followed by two people. And situational awareness, thinking ahead. He has many stories in which, through running nightclubs and being overrun by gangbangers, things where he's had to think ahead to lock things up properly, to lock up money properly, or to put things in the right place before he physically moved into action on the actual threat. In this case, throwing my mother the keys to the car, saying, get inside the car, lock the doors, do not unlock the doors, no matter what happens type of advice. And he was pleased with the fact that there was no argument there. That was the other part of the story, that it was not an argument. No, I'm going to stay. No, just okay. Yeah, better to do that and secure in his mind at the moment his number one asset, the person that he's seeing. Get in the car, lock the doors. Two people turning around, flipping off the sports coat with one move, and in two blows, 2 blows, because this guy could hit like Tyson, but I would think he went beyond to a certain degree in his prime. Flattened out those individuals without warning. Now think about this, no argument, no no, hey, what the hell is this, to prepare them, to give them a chance to swing on him, but already knowing that they're coming in for the kill. So look at this Asian guy dating this white girl. Yeah, we're going to teach him a lesson. So he grew up in that post-Vietnam era as an Asian in Old Portland and has learned a few things about situational awareness and many, many other stories. Getting out into the other stories, it just gives you a glimpse. In some cases, when you're picking up on that potential threat, you want to let them know. You don't want to let them know at all that you know that they're a threat. Okay, it's the element of surprise, as important as the power to that punch. The element of surprise. In some cases, it is important to be the first person that strikes. Legally, that's a different situation when it comes down to fight or flight, and they're after you and your girlfriend, and that part is clear. There's no time for talking or giving any warning whatsoever. Okay. So that is where we're going to go with that, where we're going to pause as we segue. There's advice he gave, right, to take a look at what's happening on YouTube when people are drinking. And I mentioned I've seen videos where people are going out there being boastful. Some women are attracted to this part of the ooga booga, show your aggression, ooh, protect her, protect the. So certain instincts are like wired into the attraction, where someone might be attracted to a person that's boastful and openly violent. That's not necessarily the most strategic for a woman, to be with a boastful man that creates many other enemies because he likes to fight. But to a certain amount of women, that's going to be, oh yeah, all the way to that one. Oh yeah, that's an aggressive one. He might be a really good protector for the nest. And I'm sorry, but we as human beings, I get deeper into what is the nature of us as a physical, specimen, mass consciousness of men and women. Unless you are an independent thinker, then most of us are going to be tapped into the hive mind. And the hive mind is automatic biology and cues from this reality. Easily controlled, in other words. Easily sent over a cliff. Bye, bye, Obama, Trump, Clinton, Trump, Obama, Bush. All different types of gender warfare, man supreme, woman supreme, manufactured illusions. So this was all written in 2015. What have we seen since then? A society that hasn't hit the fan yet, but is already acting right like they flipped their shit. But the banks are still functioning. There's no fallout per se, but they're already acting like they flipped their shit. What does that tell us? What does that tell us? The power of suggestion over the mob now, here and now. What if they were to attempt to create mobs in certain areas using electromagnetic weapons, for those that want to go up in that alley? Go up into that part of the attic and bring that down? You want to bring that out of the attic? Let's look at that. But, then there's going to be certain repercussions for anyone that's going to remain in our urban area, like Portland or others, that may be targeted with a potential frequency. And some have alleged that that's exactly what they did in Los Angeles. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen Red Dawn the remake. I need to get back to this, shouldn't I? But yeah, I just can't hold this back. China stepped in to make sure that China was removed from being the actual enemy or threat in the Red Dawn remake from 2012. And I always wondered, why did that movie even get made to begin with? At its actual inception, as far as the people that decided, hey, we're going to do a remake and feature China. Like, were they having a vision? Were they trying to warn America? Were they having similar concerns as I? Or were they doing it from the perspective of predictive programming? But if they were doing it from this perspective of predictive programming, why would China then step in and go, no, 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 no? I don't think the elites are really divided as people think, as divided as people think. I think they're unified. Maybe someone was trying to warn. Maybe someone was having somewhat of, we really just don't know. But we do know that China stepped in and said, no, 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 you're going to change the enemies to be North Korea. And there's a few shots in that particular movie. I have the DVD, so I'll show you those later. Because we're getting, for the first time in a Hollywood movie, visuals of what could be, and very similar to Leon Legant's vision of America under siege, with Chinese and Russian forces marching on America. And my own kind of waking, not so much like dream vision, but like waking, like, whoa. I'm feeling everything's coming to X marks the spot. where a lot of women, a lot of white women could end up in white slavery in occupied America. That's why they've been sexualizing the youth for a long time. People don't really take it to that direction. In this movie, you see shots of people being put into shipping containers, which is what I see in my waking knowing. My waking kind of, West Coast United States, Astoria, Oregon area, same places where China's drilling with the U.S. Navy. Disaster preparedness. Off the coast of Oregon, seriously, dude, I'm just seeing more of this stuff just match up that interview between myself and Leon Lagan. Check out my past work. Subscribe to this channel if you're new. It goes down the rabbit hole. At least 10 years. How long I've been warning about this. But that's the unfortunate situation that people are dealing with. In some cases, it's really going to come down to protecting their loved ones from ending up in any of those groups that end up being marched by gunpoint into shipping containers destined for export outside the borders of the United States. Okay. We're talking in some situation the ultimate nightmare that Americans in our generation and previous have never actually experienced. Is that level of forced shanghaiing or kidnapping. In fact, we really haven't seen it since the old days of Portland, Oregon. Places like Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, San Francisco, California, where the men that built America during that period of the gold rush ended up shanghaied by their own brethren. And the British were involved, and the French were involved in using these slaves and buying these slaves via the Crips that worked the Pacific Northwest and the area along the Pacific Ocean. The cripping game, not to be confused with the pimping game. I'm just here to remind you that Shanghai kidnapping prostitution is as American as apple pie. So you look at these people buying each other with Bitcoin. I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of not. As people get to learn to grease the pole. Pole dancing classes, everybody, for you and your daughter. Be prepared for the occupations of tomorrow, now subsidized by the government. Whoosh, Donald Trump slapping that ass. Yeah. Greasing that pole, baby. It's like Chris Rock said, we got to keep our girls off the pole and our boys off the pipe. So you see, they're social engineering this super soldier, super whore complex state. The question is why? Because we can see it, they're social engineering the video games and other things on the internet and mass pop culture. Not to mention what's on the radio these days. So ultimately, I'm alluding to advanced social engineering of an unadvanced slave class that's being socially engineered to almost like walk into the cage. Walk into the cage. And I think this type of warning is to complement other types of warnings where people might be really like trustful of the government coming to contain the fallout from the terrorists. Right? But what if the government funds the terrorists? And they manufacture terror threats to create giant police states and put people in camps. See, I'm concerned there's a lot of so-called survivalists out there that don't realize the game being played on them. They're going to sit there and get people to think innocent people trying to get out of a war zone have pledged allegiance to ISIS. Why don't you look at the spotlight back on you, how they're demonizing off-gridders as sovereign citizens. Start connecting the dots here. How about the Me Too movement? All these men are rapists. All these actors. People are coming out. People are coming out blaming the president. People are coming out blaming all these other people. How do we know when this case is true and that case is not true? When there's cover-up there and there's not cover-up there? The answer is people don't. And based on their own political bias, people divide into fight camps. And it's the real-life Royal Rumble. But in this case, if you go down, elements of your family might go down as well in a mob situation. You hold on to your daughter's hand. And there are people moving around that never got prepped with food and water, that have been propagandized to hate their perceived racial enemy for years. Whoomp, 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 until one day, poof! No resources, no power, no lights, and just watch. Sit back and just watch. And that's what's scary. That's what's scary. It's the idea of the people that are going to be in urban environments. That's why I care and I make this video, regardless whether some of you get this, call this fear-mongering, or some of you take it to heart. Especially those of you that are my female fans that have, I'm not saying like everybody's got to move to Colorado. I'm not even saying that. Some of you are in areas that I think will be overtaken by these dark forces. So there may be better places in your state of Oregon, in your state of California, in your state of just name some place, okay? Arizona. A lot of people have gotten really used to living in the grid. And I think that they've socially engineered things for women to advance further than men in certain areas, but not in all cases, but in some maybe, but not in all cases to liberate the woman through the modern neo-feminism, but to create that gender divide. And what that does essentially over a great deal of time, but it could be done essentially in a decade, and my most watched videos talk about good men leaving mainstream society, future repercussions for women's safety when the good men leave society. When it's a gender warfare game, that same system that preferred women will prefer the robots or the robot women. Or they will see class warfare or ethnic competition amongst the females within the ivory tower cities in which they are left, in which the good men have been removed. So once we adapt to these environments with class, racial, other forms of discrimination and start considering it normal, right? Especially if someone's on the side of benefiting for that moment, you're only benefiting at the moment. The same system that will promote one against the other will eventually turn on the one that prospers from the one on the bottom. I'm not preaching communism or socialism. I'm preaching getting outside the box of just acting like, you know, we have to step on the head of our brother to get up in life. You don't need to step your foot on his head to get out of that hole. You need to step on that actual ladder and then pull up on that bar. Pull up out of the swimming pool. Pull up out of that pool of energy. Pull yourself up, man. Pull yourself up. Don't kick on the woman or the girl or ledge them down or kick them down. Kick your foot on the ledge that was built there on the ladder. Use the ladder to pull yourself up. I'm telling you, and I'm one of the few that's telling you this deeply. Because there's some that'll turn to me that want you in the Civil War to want you to kick, yeah, take that leftist. Yeah, take that rightist. Take that Trump supporter. Take that Trump voter. Take that perceived Clinton voter. Take that perceived Clinton supporter. Even if that's not what they are. We see people on both sides doing just that. And I've been asking you in multiple videos. Not only is the deep state really against Donald Trump, but did we see this behavior 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago against Americans? The answer is no. People were mostly concerned with the government. It wasn't the people in the United States. So something's brewing. All this is critical information with mob stuff because people are being caught up in political mobs and people are getting caught up in death threats over political passions and people are finding themselves targeted for political beliefs in this country, including their homes vandalized and other horrible things. Over people being swept up emotionally through the things that have been on the internet. It's affecting the smallest communities and moving to an incredibly small community where things move very slowly. All of a sudden, they're very, very influenced by the current political situation where things were a particular way in recent years. It's only in the last few years that like a divide, like a stab in the heart word divide should not be where these political battle lines have been drawn. You know, I really don't see Hillary Clinton supporters. You know, I just see a lot of people like raving and raving about other people losing. When I know there's plenty of people like myself that are independent, that didn't choose a master, Democrat or Republican, that don't believe in it. We don't believe that we're affecting reality by choosing between the false choices. Why should that isolate us from normal society by not believing in a fairy tale, like a fairy tale of Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy? So this is where there's a fork in the road. There are people that are pro-government, pro-media, and don't realize that there's been a manufactured divide amongst the people. Thus, their advanced knowledge with mobs is only so much. But of course, there's going to be other things that he's going to expand on, like fighting mentality and tactics. that I believe should be shared and mirror many of the things that I've been saying, and as well written in his own words. Learn a few moves is one thing, but they are nearly useless until you've practiced them many times. So I'm just going to sum it up. Learning how to hit, learning how to defend, and mastering those techniques is way more important than learning 1,000 techniques, just as a basic principle. Learn how to defend the same way, and even whether it's jiu-jitsu and going on the ground, that's relevant too, because you don't want someone to take you on the ground and pound. For a lot of these situations, somebody wants to be able to stay on their feet and defend themselves against someone trying to take them down to the ground and put them into a very bad situation while someone goes after their spouse. So there's so much you can do for your spouse in a situation where there's 1 or 2 or 3 trying to take you to the ground. Talks about the visualization of using lethal force. Better to be judged by 12 philosophy than carried by 6. This is not professional self-defense advice. There's a lot of things I'm holding back. You know, there's certain self-defense items that some people just are unable to use or see value in. That to the person that's well trained in that self-defense item, that's going to be lethal in their hands. That's not necessarily something you can teach. And I'm not claiming to be an expert. Yeah, I am claiming to have a strong opinion on it. Certain weapons in the hands of certain folks are going to be really lethal with those weapons. Even if someone thinks that weapon is a joke. Something like a spring baton. Something like that can crack a skull. If someone doesn't know how to actually swing with the spring baton, then it's going to be a joke. To them, it's just a little toy. It's literally a toy or a sex toy you play around with your lever. It's not like a literal lethal top-notch weapon because they have no idea how it's used. So there's a lot of ignorance in our culture, despite all the MMA. And there's actually a real lack of knowledge with regards to stick fighting. Non-lethal blunt objects that you can use other than putting a hole in someone, lead in someone, or stabbing someone and causing fatal wounds. And see, a lot of people that can't fight in the society that are programmed a certain way, do or die, do or die. There are many people out there that will go for something lethal, like a knife or a gun, resulting in someone dying when it's not a life or death situation. Of course, I keep saying you want to use discernment because it's a society where a lot of people will unleash lethal force when it's not a life or death situation. Someone should also have the ability to do anything that's necessary to defend themselves or someone else from attempted kidnapping or going along with someone that wants to bind your feet or put you into a immobile position. And that's something else to think about. You know, like how bad it actually could be once you're bound and things of that nature. And the dangers of thinking that, you know, in certain situations, well, if you just go along with a kidnapper, you know, that you'll stay alive. And it's a really difficult call. That's why cultivating your spiritual side, your intuition, and being able to access the answers within in a do-or-die situation, highly critical. Continuing on, let's move forward. Okay, he's still talking about the psychology of striking. Like I've heard for years, you know, it's concept of striking through an object, whether you're hitting a bag or something else, to strike through your opponent. The moment that you know a fight is going to happen, you should strike with the aim to incapacitate, okay, or knock out. Mastering the knockout blow, then going back to mastering that strike hundreds of times, thousands of times, with a partner, with a bag, various ways of doing that, many videos that get into that. But honing in and mastering the punch, adding in, of course, for women, the palm strikes. And the importance of striking in ways that is not going to damage your hand. Fight dirty, nothing's off the table, yada, yada, yada. You need to fight dirty and exploit your angry rage. You may appear as a lunatic to others, and this is precisely what you want. You may be amazed at how many people back off when faced with a lunatic. More of the stories from the friend of the past, working in nightclubs where a bunch of Bloods or Crips may come in and, you know, when he had the ability, when he was at that age, to deal with those crowds, going after the leader, appearing crazy, super violent in some situations. And he would say how, they would talk about it again, that boy over there, he crazy. But he would say, what that really translates to is they're afraid of you. So you think about it in a situation where one guy is done with 10 walking through the door, in situations that requires that type of aggression to deal with a crowd. So they don't all attack at once they see their leaders going down, or a maniac with multiple beer bottles, smashing those empty beer bottles very quickly, with the box, mind you, over the head of multiple gangbangers trying to riot in the club after stealing the bartender's tips. But you think that whole crowd of people is going to want to go after that one Asian dude who's knocking out their biggest dudes? So things like that, even though it sounds very violent and boastful, when it comes down to it and you're dealing with a mob situation, there's only one thing and one thing that an aggressive mob will deal with, or respond to, or back down from. Okay? And that's when they question themselves and their ability to walk away from a situation that they don't really need to start with a dude who's obviously causing devastation to people around him. Surviving a dog attack. It doesn't recommend hitting the dog in the head. It does recommend choking, but dogs are particularly good at getting out of a choke. But before you even get into that, hold your arms up high to make yourself appear large and not turn your back to the dog. This, of course, applies to humans and bears and other threats. The moment you do, the dog will attack, the human will attack, the bear, the mountain lion. Maintain your stance and shout loudly to appear more than its match. Then walk slowly backwards, all the time facing the dog. With a human, again, it's a case-by-case scenario. You may want to keep your voice down and not aggravate a maniac. There's a lot of people out there with mental health crises that are just looking for trouble with the law, looking for trouble with others, that do not preserve their own life and freedom from incarceration. That is institutionalization. That's mental illness. Someone that will act in a deliberate manner that will result in backlash from institutions, government, others. There are many people that just run around our nation looking for someone to respond to the energy that they're creating, and they're not waking up and realizing that they're creating wreckage for themselves and everyone else. So as long as we're in this physical reality, we need to be aware that there are people like this every single day, all around us, and avoid unnecessary dramas. That's all part of preparing. Avoiding unnecessary dramas. Avoiding vampiric relationships. Avoiding draining situations. Haggling and bartering. The importance of that. We may need to haggle, barter, with people with different political views than ourselves. That's what I'm throwing in. Okay. So these are obvious things to get into. He talks about neutralizing the effects of tear gas. Some of this stuff may be obvious. Obviously, we can learn more online. The authorities will often seek to quell disturbances and restore order by deploying riot troops. Often we see response to Antifa, even reporters that are Antifa being tear gassed because they're filming the whole thing. This has been going on for years between protesters and police. Whatever the motive for a protest, one often used tool by authorities is tear gas. You should not hang around a riot zone. That goes without saying. Some reporters, they're going in for the story, and not really like, oh, we're a mainstream media reporter, what do you tear gas us? It's the police state, man. Reporter from Fox News, CBS, ABC, Inter, Alphabet, mainstream media here. Are you just now waking up to the police state? Oh yeah, woke up and smelled the tear gas. Get a gas mask. If you find yourself cornered, and tear gas is a possibility, wrap something around your mouth, at the very least. Preferably moisten with water. A bandana is ideal, but anything will do. I need something for a potential fire, as well as a fire extinguisher. We're going to talk about equipment in a future video. Subscribe if you're new. And I'm going to create a playlist as we build and expand these videos, so it'll all be in one place. So if you do become exposed to tear gas, believe it or not, toothpaste smeared under the eyes can give you relief. Also, a solution of antacid tablets, like Tums, mixed with water. or bicarbonate of soda. Can give relief to your eyes, mouth, throat, or skin. So that's good information. Maybe have that in your pack. Scavenging. Human beings have scavenged for 200,000 years, and it's theorized by some that we have done more scavenging than hunting over our entire history. Scavenging is relatively easy, but there are dangers, so you need to be fast and assess quickly what is worth taking and what should be left. Many of the current scavenging opportunities, such as dumpster diving, will be less useful in times of chaos and scarcity of food, goods, scarcity. But people will still throw things away to a certain extent, therefore rifling through other people's garbage will still be a worthwhile task. Of course, you have some people that are dealing with their own economic collapse. They're learning about being homeless on like a more survival situation where they don't have a car, they don't have residual income, they don't have a YouTube channel, they don't have a website. They're not mobile. They got nothing and a mental health crisis or one on the way. That's a situation where you have people that are dealing with urban survival, living on cardboard, living on the outskirts of town, while an element of society is still existing and producing goods and services. Now, of course, if you have a situation where those goods and services are erupted, and you have everybody all of a sudden elevated to the level of food scavengers. Obviously, there's going to be people going, no, 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 this is our turf. We've been doing this for years. Who are you poor people to be coming up in our grill being poor as well, trying to survive? Look at how we have even people trying to flee to areas in Colorado and elsewhere. And people see it as an invasion, but it's really economics. Are people fleeing California because the economics there? Although people don't agree on the root cause of their woes. But look at what it's caused. An escape from California. And then it's caused a surplus in certain areas like Portland. And became hip, trendy, cool to go, place to go, where we haven't cut down every last tree, but we're on our way. Come and help us. You know, seriously, come and help us. Bring your whorehouses as well. Let's fuck the night away. No, there's not good things happening in Portland, but let's just be real. This is ongoing zombie apocalypse in real action. Let's talk about it. So you have like people like me, economically squeezed out, homeless for a short period of time, but a person like myself goes off grid, continues doing videos, helping some of you. And so that energy comes back. What about those that don't have confidence in their own truth because they don't have their own truth? That have just been squeezed out by the modern. We have all these humans, and our heart goes out to them that are lost, that are wandering in this country because they don't know how to improve their situation. And the system seems rigged against them. Okay, a system like that that's rigged against them has something way in the wings for an entire country that's going to be going hungry at once. Okay, capiche? You get the picture. And that's why, right, surviving urban chaos is really, really critical. Same rules and principles to all of these things. Food, water, communication, 72-hour, grab and go. All of this applies to the person on the go or the person living off the grid or a person like myself. There's a big difference between a guy living off the grid on an acre, by the way, that's just living off the grid but not like doing the full homesteading with the animals and whatnot. Self-sustain, that means with water. That's a different situation who's established, who has hundreds of acres that is spaced between them and other neighbors for those animals on property that is zoned to have multiple animals. You can't even have multiple animals legally on a property of this size to even do some of those homesteading things because of the rules and regulations. It is very clear, right, what's a big step and what's a violation over. And that's just the thing that people need to consider. So a lot of things are about economics, and certain economic realities can prevent someone from being fully off the grid or getting involved in certain off-grid activities because of the permits required. So anytime someone like yourself or myself has the opportunity to work with other people where there's mutual respect, that's always key, that's the top, with other off-gridders that want to allegedly have intentional community, to see what a few people can do to live outside the dollar. And without police forces, without food assistance, without these things, and it may take a while, but to get to the point through several seasons, to be able to grow the things that they need to do a number of things, including baking their own bread. Hell, why should someone be spending $100 on a loaf of bread when they should be baking their own bread out of course, right, some wheat that they grinded, or some wheat or something that they grew or harvested from the wild that was ground into some sort of a flour substance that was thus from that point baked. And even some of the Native Americans knew some of this. And I haven't necessarily done this myself, but you know, when you retreat into nature and do some of these natural things with other people, and I've only had a few experiences where it was that natural, but not really enough. It is a very grounding experience. More grounding than one guy like me being off the grid, talking about off-grid things for a number of years, but when you literally step back from technology completely, how would we deal with an EMP or something that would remove our entertainment, my entertainment? How easily would we adapt to a non-digital smart screen, although it doesn't make us all that smart, whether it's someone with their cell phone or me looking at the internet all day long, and it really comes down to what we're looking at. But are we prepared to go all the way back to nature? One thing I ask people to think about, I don't have the answer, but you know, when I meet off-gridders, we're in hill country. There's no rivers up in here, but there are down below miles. What could be created that would be effective, more effective than a vehicle that needs gasoline? To transport some sort of a vehicle. People look at me like I'm funny or something when I talk about this. You know, I don't necessarily say free energy, but something that's definitely going to be very efficient on fuel. Or would it be one of those hydrogen engine whatever thingies, or some motorized scooter, but something that can haul water in and out of a community that isn't a truck. You know, or ways to harvest rainwater by digging ditches in specific areas where there's rain off. Been doing a lot of videos today. Deep breath. Runoff from hopefully a road that has a bunch of chemicals on it. You know, and I've discovered since living here, you know, there's a little area that'll collect hundreds of gallons of rainwater during a particular period of the year in which the water is falling. And during July, I think that's also known as the monsoon period. I think there may be a number of different periods by someone being strategically prepared with containers, right? They can store basically a lot of water that can be used later. So we're going to come back to that. Okay, the author goes over just a few basic threats that he is concerned about, starting at the point he puts terror attacks at the front. And I mentioned earlier that I think there could be some manufactured events to make things that there, I think we already have seen that, to steer things in a particular direction and create political messiahs and political demons and box the populations against each other over issues the government actually creates or regulates or has control over, or the elite, that is. So, but that is there, and what it says is, in the event of a radioactive release, you should tape up your windows with plastic sheeting, because it is possible that a event could happen, and Portland, Oregon drilled for such an event. And there's many movies that have been whoop, whoop, you know, adding to the predictive programming, Jericho, right, of tape up your, and even years ago, this goes all the way back to Bush, get ready, have this stuff ready to tape up your house. So yeah, if you live within 10 miles of a reactor, I recommend you keep this is important, a stock of potassium iodide pills in the case the authorities do not have enough to hand out. Take them only under medical direction in the event of a release. As far as chemical and biological attacks are concerned, there's little else you can do except to use the plastic sheeting as described earlier. Just pray to the Creator. Talks about flooding. If you live in an area prone to hurricanes or susceptible to regular flooding, then I recommend keeping a stock of sandbags. How about a boat? If you live in Oregon, West Coast, have a boat. Get ready to throw your stuff in a grab-and-go kit. Do not underestimate the chances of flooding. Dive bags, things that are waterproof. So not a typical backpack, but a waterproof backpack. Do not underestimate the speed of rising water. It can rise inches in a matter of minutes. Tornado. Okay, if you live in an area prone to tornadoes, you need to at least have a car so you can quickly throw in your 72-hour bags at minimum and get the hell out of there. I'm going to be looking at, by the way, new tents. Of course, there's backpacking, and then having a lightweight tent. Then there's having something with a little bit more space for an inflatable mattress. And throw up something like a heater, like this. This is my Mr. Buddy heater. Something about tenting with a little bit more luxury just to simply get out and hike more. So I am looking at higher quality, more spacious tents. I think for myself and getting out in the wilderness more, being that is my goal, in 2018, once the car's fixed, to drive around more and to have more of a backpacking tent for longer expenditures beyond the car, and then basically car camping. Camping right outside the car with like a large size tent, so I can stretch out, maybe even sit in a chair like I am right now, and basically have the wilderness right outside that large tent that somehow I'll be able to set up by myself. So practicing bugging out and getting out of your comfort zone, right? Because yeah, it's like I'm camping here. This is good training, but it's my comfort zone. It's my land. If there was a natural disaster or other disaster or threat activation locally, either towards a region or myself, relocation would need to be sudden. There would need to be some sort of advanced planning. So one is not caught, if you will, with their pants down and without a container full of water and without a pack full of things. The author then gets into Civil War. I just provided my narrative that I believe that's being manufactured, and we're overlooking that. Let's go over what he has to say. Civil wars vary greatly depending on where they are in the world. Often there may be ethnic tensions, and you may be at risk simply because of your heritage or looks. See, some people think about that only when it's in relation to them, not in relation to others. And so now we have a society where someone talks about that, they could be called a social justice warrior or racist against a particular group. What they're expressing how the social engineering can, and the illusions of separation, which I've been talking about for over a decade, can lead to that type of targeting, persecution, suspicion, fear. So it talks about the first you cannot control. So cannot control the ethnic tensions or the fear from others. But the second, you can to a small degree. Ideally, you should be trying to get out of town or those places where those tensions are going on as soon as possible if you are a potential target. So think about this, if you may be a potential target. If you have to stay put for a few days before you can move, you could try to pass for being a member of another group, but this is a very bad strategy, as it only takes one neighbor to rat you out and you could be killed. If civil war is being conducted along these lines, you need to get to the safe side as soon as possible. A lot of Americans have never lived through something like that, or the Underground Railroad. You know, I've been doing what I've been doing for over a decade. My faith is in the Creator. But it's not like it's set up for like there to be an Underground Railroad situation, going from safe house to safe house to safe house. But people and their loved ones, if they're planning ahead, and we talked in part 1 about the family rally point and keeping certain plans secret amongst you and your family members, if the you-know-what were to hit the fan. So there has to be planning, and there has to be accurate foresight in the direction that America is going in. And there's a lot of denial. And thus some people aren't as prepared as they should. Some people that are widely in support of the current political situation are making the mistake of assuming that the economic woes that we're in are being corrected. The people that they're in support of could be there to make the situation worse, meaning that threatens those that want to survive off the grid or in the grid. An economic collapse, a dollar collapse, especially if it's done deliberately by a selected puppet. That would not be good for us. And the television sets from Fox News to CNN to co-opted elements of the alternative media, amping up racial tensions and political tensions. We don't need that. But it's happening now. Are people swept up in this? From the biggest cities in America to the smallest off-grid plots? Yes. Is that a sign that people are susceptible to being whipped up in a particular direction and that something evil is behind this? Yes, yes, yes. Not to sound too excited. Now don't get me wrong. Fuel shortage. Do I really need to read that section? All the trickle-down effects of the fuel shortage, all the trickle-down effects of the meltdowns of the nuclear plants, the EM pulse, the economic collapse, right? Let's conclude here. We've covered a lot. Recommended training. Training can benefit you immensely. It allows you to not just acquire knowledge in an efficient manner, but also to practice that knowledge so that it is second nature before you need to use it to save your life or others. Training will also allow you to hone useful skills that you can use for goods in the event of a crisis. Here are some skills, all of which I strongly recommend you develop by formal training. First aid. Do you know what to do if someone collapses in front of you? Can you do CPR? Do you know how to use those little, I had to take a CPR class, a first aid class. When I was taking electives, when I was doing radio broadcasting in 2005, 6, and 7 at a community college, think first before borrowing money to go to school for a job that may not exist for what you're going for. But one of the electives, Wilderness Survival, 2007, 6, as I was getting into this and talking about it more on my show, a decade before I got my own acre, started making payments, which is what I'm doing now, halfway through. I remember some of the first aid training, and I realized the importance of being able to care for yourself, like a tooth infection, which I've struggled with, getting care for that. I've struggled with getting care for what they say needs a root canal. And so I've been using herbs and other things, a lot of garlic, to deal with that inflammation other than continually going down to ER for antibiotics. That's not the path that I'm currently taking because I had to learn around that. That wasn't going to fix the constant inflammation. Reducing all sugar and taking in things that are going to get up in there, like clove oil, like oil of oregano, like apple seed cider vinegar, like coconut oil pulling, like tea tree oil, like those things and more, like swishing with salt. Do you see sometimes, right? We may have a pain or something, but we then learn how to heal from ourselves by learning from the pain. Wild food identification. Check out some of the videos that I've put on that. Obviously, highly important and recommended in the recommended training section. Martial arts. Know what your strengths are. You may not have a teacher that'll really bring out your strengths. Okay? We may have to teach ourselves that. And it's something that I've had to teach myself to a certain degree. There's certain ways of fighting that are not for certain body styles, and there are ways of certain fighting and striking that are absolutely lethal if you know how to get inside and develop the blow very quickly. Private pilot's license. I see these people flying around. There are these, propeller planes and kits. There are also kits for helicopters. I guess there's an air balloon as well. I guess that could be an off-grid thing. But anything that can get you like off of the ground and up in the air would obviously be like a major asset. Yeah, there's no guarantee that foreign troops or aliens are going to eat or shoot you down. So, what if there was a flooding situation, a pole shift, dun, 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 and you just need to fly to a safer part of the mountain? Would you rather go, right, in a makeshift helicopter? Now, I'm getting ideas. Anybody want to, donate to the Alex Ansary Helicopter Fund? You just let me know. Okay, the last section that we're going to cover. Keeping mind and body fit. It's all well and good preparing your survival cache and knowing what to do in specific situations as well as practicing it and training for it, but you cannot ignore your mental and physical condition either. Having an optimal mental outlook is also key in survival. Right now we need to do that because our psyche is under attack. We're being weakened as a collective. All this is applicable now. You can even say that we're already surviving a collapse of an element of our society, even if the whole pillars haven't collapsed themselves. The collapse, the moral fiber of the society has already begun to occur. Maintaining a daily routine. There's a lot of people that think if they're awake that have become addicts to social media. So, what does it mean to you to be healthy? Write down those things and implement them. To adapt to particular foods that might be survival foods. And to adapt to not having certain things around. Cigarettes, coffee, sweets, meats. Certain things that may be typical in our diets. Supplements that enhance the mental state, which I've never specifically talked about. But being up at high elevation, I have recently purchased B12 to naturally increase the serotonin. Because when living at mountain elevation, certain off-grid areas, sometimes there's not a lot of people up there at certain elevations for more than one reason. It might not just be because it's the bad part of that county. Sometimes it could be because it's a higher elevation and people have a higher predisposition to depression, and they may not even know, for example, that even in Colorado, they've done studies on the effects of living at higher elevation and a drop in serotonin in the human brain. So, what are certain things that can boost serotonin? Sitting in the sun, exercise, things of that nature. Gets into long-term survival, but do we need to really get into it? Ultimately, it's about the will to survive. And a lot of people have lost that. We have to maintain that. More so, it's about thriving and being healthy in mind, body, and spirit. At the cornerstone of our preparedness plan. Next to that, having a firm spiritual grounding. For some, a spiritual connection with God. Some are looking more in the direction of Jesus. There are different paths. I believe there are different paths to reaching the mind of the one, the Creator. Okay, so I think that right now evil has run amok, and a lot of the people that are talking about the battle of good and evil from a Christian perspective are missing the larger perspective, and they're getting a little bit political. They've given too much faith to the politicians of this day and age, as they've been damning particular elements of our society that don't believe that things have changed. You know, they're forgetting that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there are people out there, you know, that are discussing some of this survival information, but they're terrifying their audiences. In some ways, they're preparing them to take part in the mob. In some ways, some of the survivalists and people supposedly warning you are programming people to be that mob. And I'm your Alex Ansary telling you need to get away from that mob. Okay? So I'm going to give you my perspective and some decent information that's been put out there. This now concludes part 2 of the Urban Survival and Preparedness book series. I'm Alex Ansary reminding you the path to the ultimate truth and place of power still lies within.